Hello everyone. Now we are talking about the special theory of relativity, which constitutes the overwhelming part of this course. Now we will take up the content of lecture 1 of the notes which I have already been sent to you. And this time it will be some introductory remarks and some mathematical outlines only. Essentially, special theory of relativity is the first extension people thought of going beyond classical physics, but without having to go into the quantum world or the submicroscopic world. In the macroscopic world, among things that do meet the naked eye or specially devised instruments of the macroscopic world, you can see certain manifestations to which will come later, where the age-old classical physics laws came to be questioned a little bit. In order to understand this, let us start with Newtonian mechanics. Newtonian mechanics has been widely successful in the world that is seen with our naked eye. There are a number of built-in assumptions there, and I mentioned two of them. First is that the force acting on a body is proportional to its acceleration. F equal to something times A, and the constant of proportionality is called mass. Mass is velocity dependent in the Newtonian thing. The question is, can there be any situation where velocity decides the mass? If so, then an accelerating body will be endowed with different masses effective in the equation, and therefore the simple law of potentiality or proportionality will be suspect. So this is one assumption which sometimes can be questioned, and Newton, in several aphorisms of his work, has in fact noted them down as an assumption in his formulation. The second assumption is that time is assumed to flow independently of observers and reference frames. Consider two frames S and S prime in page 1 of your lecture notes. If S prime is moving with respect to S with velocity V along the X direction, suppose S is static with respect to some observer, then the coordinate X prime is given by X minus Vt, so long as the origins of the two reference frames coincide at the time when clock is ticked on. Again, this is built on the assumption that time flows equally or with same rate in both S and S prime. One may ask, suppose it is not so, then of course the transformation law X prime equals X minus Vt, which is called Galilean transformation, is not valid. We will see that there can be situations where both the assumptions 1 and 2 are subject to revision. And this became apparent not from a detailed study of mechanics to start with, but from a study of classical electrodynamics. The equations which formulated by James Clerk Maxwell related electricity and magnetism or all electromagnetic phenomena under 4 equations written in terms of vectors. We will come to a detailed examination of this, but in order to develop to our point, the logical flow which will lead us through this course, in order to follow that flow, we will just remind ourselves of a few mathematical preliminaries, which I'm sure are known to all of you, either from the high school level itself or at the beginning of your undergraduate courses. But still, let us just mention them for argument's sake. And I'm not going through details of the mathematical steps, neither shall I do that in my other recorded lectures, because First of all, in the notes, the mathematical steps are explained in great detail in words also. And secondly, if you have doubts about them, you can always ask them when we meet over Google Meet. The first idea of that of partial derivatives, suppose a function f is a function of x, y, and z, not a single variable, but a function of 3 variables, then the partial derivatives with respect to x or y can be defined in the way I have written here. And an example of such partial derivatives is given in the beginning of page 3 up to equation 3, after which the technical definition of a partial derivative is given in equation 4. Now, it may so happen that an object moving in space is experiencing a potential f, which is a function of x, y, and z. But since the object is moving, it is moving to different points in time, different points in the space with time, and therefore the potential it is experiencing is also varying with time. That is because it is a function of x, y, and z, and x, y, and z are changing with time as the object moves. In this case, the value of the potential changing with time for that object, which is the so-called total derivative df dt, can be expressed in terms of various partial derivatives in a way which is outlined in equation 5. Now, let us just recollect a few more things of vector calculus before we end today's discussion. A vector can be expressed in terms of its 3 components along the x, y, and z axis in Cartesian coordinates in more than one ways, which are outlined in the beginning of page 4. And out of 2 vectors, first of all, you can add them and form a third vector. Out of A and B, you can form C using a very straightforward prescription. Similarly, out of 2 vectors, you can construct products, the first of which is the so-called scalar product, which again can be defined in at least 2 different ways as written in the notes. Next, out of the same pair of vectors, you can construct a third vector whose prescription is also given in more than one ways here. At this point, I set down an exercise. All these items written under EX, then a slash and a dash means exercise, and these are homework assignments. These are under blue boxes where a double line is there on the left. In this exercise, which is part of your first assignments, tells you to prove that more than one definitions being there for vector and scalar products, they are equivalent. It is very simple, you all know this, and it is done in all textbooks. So you are free to copy them with the only request that you understand what you are copying. Next, we come to remind ourselves that a vector can be constructed out of partial derivatives, operators del x, del y, and del z as the 3 components of this vector. And this is the so-called del vector or nabla operator or whatever you call it. I'm not going to prove, detailed proof of the fact that these 3 components form a vector. That is part of your mathematical methods course. But all I'll say is that this del operator empowers us to define 3 quantities very useful in vector calculus. The first of which is gradient, which acting on a scalar gives a vector, just like the electric field vector is a gradient of the electrostatic potential in a static problem. The second quantity is divergence, which acting on a vector as in the form of a dot product, del dot A gives you a scalar according to the usual prescription. The third is curl, where a dot product is taken with a vector, so del cross A, which in turn gives you a vector. 2 very important theorems follow, Gauss's theorem and Stokes' theorem. The first of which defines a volume integral, divergence of a vector integrated over a volume V is connected with a surface integral with A dot ds, ds being a surface element, where the range of integration is a surface that encloses the volume or that defines the volume. The second theorem is Stokes' theorem, where the line integral of a vector A dot dl defined over a closed contour gets related to the surface integral of the curl of the vector del dot s dot ds taken over a surface whose outline is the closed contour L. Both of these have been extremely useful in electromagnetism in particular and vector calculus in general. And some examples are given in the first part of page 6. Now, the examples you can look through on your own, and if at all you have any problem, you can always ask me over email or by asking questions in our Google Meet. I end the discussion by setting down a couple of more exercise problems, more precisely 3 of them, where essentially I ask you to prove some general results related to vector calculus. Let us just end by reminding ourselves then that an electrostatic field is the gradient of a scalar potential, and therefore its curl is 0 everywhere. Such a field is called an irrotational field. And a magnetic field, static or otherwise, always is divergence-less because it is always given as the curl of a vector potential. Such a divergence-less vector field is called a solenoidal vector field. So we end here and we look forward to further discussions with you. And we will come to the next phase of our discussion in our recorded discussion 2. Thank you very much.